Buenas tardes. First of all, I'd like to thank the Chilean government, the Chilean Senate, the Chilean president, and the organizers of this meeting for this wonderful invitation to be here with you again in Chile, in Santiago. Good friends of mine here in the audience with Pedro Maldonado and the other distinguished neuroscientists of this beautiful country. And I'd like to start by saying that, during the first day, during the first panel, I heard these beautiful talks about the universe, about exoplanets, and these amazing discoveries that we're making with this new way to look at the galaxies and the cosmos. And we are going to shift a little bit our gears now to talk about a different universe, not the one above our heads, but the one between our ears. And for most of you, it may come to a surprise that the universe that we carry between our ears is much more complex than the one above us. In fact, I like to call this one the true creator of everything, because it's from here that everything that defines us as humans comes from. Everything, the things that we cherish the most in our lives, and all the information generated by every human being that ever lived, lives today and will live, comes from here. Our art, our science, our beliefs, our fears, our loves. In fact, I like to say that what we actually experience and see is nothing but the human universe that our brains create. And as such, I'm going to put away the first question of the panel, with a downside route, by saying that in my belief as a neuroscientist, actually I firmly, strongly believe there will be no digital machine that will ever replace our brains. Our brains are copyright protected. Our humanity cannot be simulated because it was generated by a completely different process, an evolutionary process. It cannot be reduced to an algorithm. It cannot be reduced to technology. Technology is a projection of our ability to abstract. That's it. It cannot replace us. Sorry, Silicon Valley, it's not going to happen. So I'd like to tell you that as neuroscientists, we are like astronomers because we chase storms. But we chase different kinds of storms. We chase brainstorms. And everybody has talked about and mentioned brainstorms in a lifetime. Every day we talk about them, but very few people have seen them or heard them. So my pointer is going dead, but this, what you see here on the left, is the first time we ever recorded 100 brain cells in a living monkey trying to decide what to do, giving a visual scene to move a hand in space. This is a brainstorm happening. And I'm going to play to you the sound of a brainstorm, a monkey brainstorm. These are the 100 cells firing in the monkey brain. But if I were recording your brain, that's what I was going to hear. As the unique sound of a primate creator of everything. So, although I told you that technology is not going to replace us, of course, there is a tremendous place for technology in our lives and for the betterment of mankind. I want to talk to you about that. How can we combine technology with human intelligence to achieve objectives that when I was in medical school 30 years ago, my professors would say would be virtually impossible. And to do that, I'm going to introduce you to a preparation that my postdoctoral advisor and I created almost 17 years ago called brain-machine interface. And basically, that's a way to get the brainstorms that you just heard about and basically record these electrical signals in real time as cells are producing them as part of a brain circuit, and translate them into digital information so that we can extract some motor commands generated by these storms and make artificial devices move according to the voluntary will of their brain. That's the reason we call it brain-machine interfaces, because these devices can also send feedback to the brain and inform the brain of what is going on. So we started working with this many years ago, in the late 90s, and I'm going to show you one of the first experiments in which monkeys were able to actually use their voluntary brainstorms to control a device. Actually, I like to say that this was the day in which the brain finally liberated itself from the physical limits of the body and could act on the world by itself. So what you're going to see is basically a monkey that learns to play a video game But what you see basically is the general paradigm in which a monkey is learning to play a video game with a joystick. And as he learns to play the video game, we are recording the brain activity coming from the motor cortex, the part of the brain that is generating the motor program for the hand to move. And we are trying to send this to computers in order to transform this information into digital signals and extract the motor commands that can be used for a robotic arm to move. And at the time we did this experiment, nobody knew what would happen, so we had no idea how the monkeys would react to it. So I'm going to show you the first monkey who was able to do that. That's Aurora, became a very famous monkey. And as you can see, Aurora is an avid video gamer. She's using the joystick to move the little tiny cursor inside of the sphere, and every time she's moving into the sphere, she's getting a drop of orange juice as a reward. And for orange juice, every monkey will do whatever a scientist wants them to do. They love that. So what Aurora didn't know is that when she was playing this game and getting it 99% correct, we are recording the electrical brainstorm that is generated in the brain about half a second before she starts moving, the brainstorm that contains the code for the movement to happen, and we are sending this code to a machine that was trying to translate that into a digital command that a robot can understand. So a few minutes after this video was made, we actually play a trick on Aurora. We remove the joystick, we turn on the brain-machine interface linkage, and we let Aurora figure out that now she could get the juice by just thinking about moving and controlling the robotic device. This is the perfect Latin American free lunch. So you get it done without moving a muscle. So it didn't take too long for Aurora to realize that she could do it. And what you're going to see is the first night she actually did it. She's actually controlling that cursor with the brainstorm you just heard, 100 neurons, and she's continuously playing the game without contracting a muscle. She's getting the reward. So she's drinking the juice for the free lunch, but what she's doing is basically, and we saw that 30 days later, she's doing something pretty spectacular. She was able to acquire a new limb, a robotic limb, because she has not lost the ability to move her other biological limbs. As you can see in this movie, she still can play with the other limbs and scratch us or get more food from a different location, but she learned that she could actually use her mind to control this robotic device to interact in the world. In fact, when we look into the brain of Aurora, on the top graph, what you see are neurons firing in yellow and red. That's the color we use for indicating lots of electrical signals when the arm of Aurora is moving, when she's controlling her own body. But in the bottom part, what you see is the same neurons now controlling the robotic device, despite the fact that the monkey's body is not moving at all. So besides being the true creator of everything, the brain is the biggest assimilator of everything that you ever heard about. Because everything that we interact with, our soccer balls, our cars, our bikes, even our loved ones, are assimilated by the brain to stretch the brain's own sense of self to the limit of the last layer of atoms that a tool controlled by the brain is capable of impacting on the world. We are not static at all. And our definition of being is very dynamic and plastic. Well, when I saw that, I coined this the Pelé theory. And I don't need to tell the Chilean audience about the greatest soccer player that ever played on this corner of the Milky Way, right? No Messi, sorry, no Maradona. It was this man called Pelé. And I like to say that if I ever had a chance to ever record the motor cortex of Pelé, I would not find, as we all thought about, a food representation on the top of the graphic. For a man who played about 1,300 games and scored more than 1,200 goals, I would find a hybrid, a ball and a foot mingled together. Because that ball, I can assure you, was part of that man's body, was part of his sense of self. So with that idea in mind, we discovered that the brain is extremely flexible. I'm going to quickly show you the last demonstration of how plastic a brain can be. A study done by a postdoc in my lab, Eric and Thompson, recently, showing that you can even use little rats to demonstrate that you can create a new sense, a new perceptual experience that doesn't exist in mammals. As you know, mammals cannot see infrared. We don't have an infrared receptor in our retina, and they cannot detect the heat generated by infrared beam. But what we did here was to train rats to touch otherwise invisible light, infrared light. So we created a prosthetic device in which an infrared sensor is placed on top of the head of this animal, and this infrared sensor can detect infrared 360 degrees around the animal. And when the infrared beam is detected, electrical pulses go to the touch cortex, the part of the cortex of this animal that is used to touch the world. And what we learn is that in 3 days, this animal starts following beams of infrared light by touching, not by seeing. So this is one of the first rats that actually did this. And you're going to see a little light beam showing up. This is taped with an infrared camera. And all of a sudden there is sound in it, if you can put it. And what you see is that even if when the beam comes on the back of the animal, he's capable of turning and going, because if he finds the infrared light with its somatosensory cortex, he will get a water reward. And rats will drink all the water you give to them in these experiments. Yes, what you're hearing is the output of the infrared sensor sending electrical pulses to the touch cortex and making this guy feel light, not see light. Well, when all these things were discovered, John Chapin and I, in 1999, and soon later in 2000 in a Scientific American article, we proposed that this technology could be used, perhaps, to repair neurological lesions that had happened, for instance, like a spinal cord injury. And we proposed that a brain-machine interface in a decade or so would be capable of reading the brainstorms of a paraplegic person and translate these motor thoughts to an external body, a robotic exoskeleton that would be able to carry this patient on the world and provide feedback to the brain so that the patient would experience, like, even though his spinal cord is completely lesioned, that he would be walking again. Well, as you can imagine, at that time, people thought that we had lost a few marbles, you know, and a Scottish and a Latin American got together in the United States and made that kind of proposal. You can imagine what they said. Well, this is 10 years later, what happened. This is the Walk Again project, an international nonprofit consortium that we put together with friends all over the world, 25 countries, 156 people, to actually try to do that. And if you look carefully, you will find the Chilean flag right there on the corner, represented by my great friend and student, former student, Romulo Fuentes, who was the scientific director of our institute in Brazil and is now here back in Chile. He was the Chilean man on the Walk Again project. And what we did was to bring together roboticists, neuroscientists, physicians, computation people, rehabilitation personnel, to actually try to put all this together and get 8 patients who had a complete spinal cord injury. One of them had a partial injury, 7 had a complete injury, to see if we could create a brain-machine interface for locomotion, to see if we could create a hybrid intelligence, a mix of the manpower of generating dreams of moving again with robotics that can do that. And this was done with laboratories all over the world. This is the exoskeleton that we built. It's a electrical, it's a very complex machine because it has analog lines, oil lines transmitting the motor commands, but it has an electrical brain that interacts with the brain of the patient. And we use only non-invasive technology to get the patients to actually walk in this device. And what they have to do, they have to get here and have to learn to imagine movements so that we can pick up electrical signals and translate them in locomotion patterns. But this exo has something else besides the ability of making people walk again. It is covered with these pressure sensors that you see here on the plantar surface of the shoe of the exo, so that when the foot of the exo touches the ground, a wave of pressure is generated to simulate the foot stand and foot fall, and then the foot lift. And then this pressure wave is delivered with micromechanical vibrators on the skin of the forearm, where all these patients still have sensitivity. So they can feel again what is to flex the knee and plant the foot on the ground every step of the way. And that proved to be the vital feature of what I'm going to show you now. Because if you only put the guy in the exo and he starts moving, it feels extremely strange. Because imagine you're paraplegic, you don't feel anything below the level of your waist. So it's like you're floating in air and you don't know if you're going to be balanced. It's very scary. But the moment we provide feedback and we put the correct speed of the exo to walk, the patients reported to us that they are not in a machine anymore. They had a phantom sensation that their legs were walking. They actually felt that they were walking by themselves. And this is what happens. This is just the application of these micromechanical elements on the forearm. It's a shirt, we call a tactile shirt. It's a haptic display that allows these patients to experience the walking. And this is the first day that one of these patients actually had the experience. This is a patient who had a lesion in the spinal cord. Of course, he's paralyzed below the level of the lesion. He doesn't have any sensitivity, but he's using now the helmet that allows us to record his electroencephalography. And for walking, we discovered that the signals that we can get with EEG, which is not a terrific system to get these brain waves, is enough to generate commands to walk. So what you're seeing now, he has given the command to walk, and now we can get these patients to control each one of the legs individually. But the most important thing is that you see the light there. The light on the helmet tells us that he's getting it right. He's producing the correct command to walk. But the interesting thing you cannot hear, unfortunately, Bruno is saying, I feel that I'm walking by myself. He's having a phantom. We discover a way to induce phantom sensations. And we can control these phantom sensations to the point in which we can simulate walking on the beach, on sand, walking on grass, on Palmeiras Stadium, the best Brazilian soccer team, as you should know, or walking in a hot pavement street. We can simulate different textures of these surfaces. Well, you may have heard that we did this project. One of the reasons is because on the opening ceremony of the World Cup, Brazil wanted to highlight a complete new country, a country that doesn't feel the stereotype that we all know about Brazil. Great soccer, although the Germans did a bad thing to us on that day, on that cup. But soccer, music, we wanted to show science. We wanted to show that Brazil can produce, with the collaboration of friends and colleagues all over the world, science that can benefit millions of people. So our suggestion to the Brazilian government, to FIFA, was that we wanted to have the opening kickoff of the World Cup opening ceremony. And we were granted that. And what you're going to see, because FIFA does not allow me to show the images of the actual kick during the World Cup, unfortunately they want us to pay a fortune for the images I cannot afford, they forgot that scientists sometimes carry cellular phones on their pockets. And Juliano Pinto, the patient who actually performed that kick, he tried 57 kicks on the field of the opening ceremony. He got 56 correct, which is much more than the Brazilian national team actually got during the World Cup. But what you're going to see is the last kick Juliano performed before going to the stadium in front of 75,000 people, crazy Brazilians and 1 billion people watching all over the world, the opening kick performed by a T4, complete paraplegic. This is mid-chest, no sensitivity below, no movement below. And you're going to see it's a very humble gesture, but it's a big gesture for him and for us. The ball is going to place. You're going to see the lights highlighting the brain-machine interface work. And when he takes the decision right now, he kicks the ball. And the most moving moment of this demonstration for me, my friends that were in the field with him, was that he started celebrating, as you see here, and he's screaming, I felt the ball. And that was our goal, not only to move, but to feel and to restore his dignity as a human being. That's what technology can do for us. But the surprise, the biggest surprise, and I'm going to finish by showing you this, came a few days later, when we performed the routine neurological examination of all 8 patients that had trained for 6 months with this device and other devices that we created. When we perform this examination, we test tactile sensitivity around the level and below the level of sensitivity, or the lesion, and motor performance at the level of the lesion and below the level of the lesion. When we did this examination in the beginning of the testing, there was no sensitivity and no movement below the level of the lesion. Well, 6 months later, on average, these patients had regained 5 dermatomes of sensitivity. They were actually feeling their own bodies now after training with this brain-machine interface chronically every day, 1 hour a day for 6 months. 5 dermatomes, which means that they could feel not only their legs, but they have all the visceral sensation that they had lost, which is very important for control of bladder and other physiological functions. They recovered that. The most shocking thing was when we did the motor examination. So the cartoon that you see on the left is the cartoon on the first day of training, and it's totally transparent because you cannot see any muscles being controlled below the level of the lesion. But if you can see, as time went by the end of a year, you see these red spots in the buttocks, in the legs, below the level of the lesion. These are muscles who could now be voluntarily controlled by the patient without the exoskeleton, without the brain-machine interface. In fact, at the end of 1 year, 50% of our patients had moved from being classified as a complete spinal cord injury patient, clinically, to an incomplete. That is very rare. It doesn't happen with people that have been in a wheelchair for 10 or 12 years like our patients. Now I can tell you, because I just came from São Paulo, 2 years later, 7 out of 8 have moved to an incomplete category. And I don't need to say much about that. I just need to show you a video of 2 patients walking by themselves. If you suspend them now, you give them support. These are patients with 12 and 14 years of chronic spinal cord injury. You're going to see in a moment how they can now step by themselves. This is one patient, and now this is the most dramatic one. You can see the stepping being performed by herself. That's because the brain is very plastic. And our hypothesis is that even though they're clinically classified as a complete spinal cord injury patient, a few axons, a few nerves may have survived in the spinal cord, and this chronic training was able to turn them on and restore some degree of mobility. This has never happened in spinal cord injury. So we are very happy to show that, and we are very happy to show that this is just the beginning. Because today you can design not only one individual and one brain-machine interface, you can have multiple individuals collaborating on a shared brain-machine interface like these monkeys of ours. And what I'm going to finish by showing is the first time 3 monkeys collaborated mentally just by combining their brainstorms to move a virtual reality arm to get the juice that they wanted. So what you see in color are the 3 brains, the output of the 3 brains playing together to get that black spot, which is the wrist of the virtual arm, into the circle and getting the reward that they want. So my final take-home message is, technology may never replace us. The future, as the president of Chile said the other night, will be human. We will take advantage of technology to cure and to expand our reach, but this is our universe and it will remain so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bien.